for my research project, but I thought they were illustrative of what I was very fascinated with was like it was the policy roots of some of our disease and public health related problems with the food system, and school lunch was what I chose to focus on. And I really looked at that, of course, this is sort of an illustration. It's maybe sort of glammed up, but I think for those of us born and raised in the United States, the American meal looks pretty familiar. Actually, the potato salad is not always a given. That seems sort of fancy for the school lunch I grew up on. I would have all the other things besides the potato salad, which seems sort of handmade. But the reality is that as a first world country, and even compared to many of the so-called tiger economies or middle income countries, we're so far behind in terms of national policies for health with regards to children. And again, these are paid with tax dollars, and it's a direct subsidy to food manufacturers who provide the food for our children. So I studied that for my master's degree in public policy. Next slide, please. And as I got more into policy, I really started to try to understand how the food movement fits into electoral politics. I grew up actually in Berkeley, California. I'm a third generation Berkeley grad. So I think it's safe to say that I didn't always feel that, the American system of Democrats and Republicans was necessarily how I was going to express my, beliefs for the world. So it was a long time coming to understand how electoral politics fit us. And so you can see this awkward picture of myself there with the senator pretty much explains how I felt, which I took an internship in graduate school in Washington, D.C., and I felt so out of place, such like a foreigner. But it was also really a mind-blowing experience. And I chose writing as my medium to start to express how fascinated I was by what was happening in D.C. And to my surprise and delight, how many allies, interesting, smart, and caring people I found there who were really devoted to changing the world. So I really tried to figure out how we can change our food system via our local, state, and federal policies. And I kept writing. Next slide, please. Thank you. One of the most important pieces of writing that has come out in the past few years is this very important article right before the pandemic, when all of public health switched to focus on something else, which was this piece in the Lancet about what's called the global syndemic of obesity, undernutrition, and climate change. It's really identifying, and I really recommend everyone look at it because I think it neatly pulled everything together in terms of what we're facing in our food system, and it unites the world. It means that our problems in the United States are not separate or unique, but that we're united with actually the whole world. And we have within our country obesity, of course, we have within our country undernutrition. And as we're seeing on the East Coast right now, we have the very urgent problem of climate change. We're experiencing it everywhere. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over a few of the underlying sort of themes of American agricultural policy before I get more into the Farm Bill, because I think that it helps us to undergird what we're dealing with. I don't have time to give go all the way into American history of 400 years, but of course that's part of what created the Farm Bill. But we'll just go quickly through some of the tenets that I've found have been repeated. And if we kind of know them going in, we're more equipped for each Farm Bill. Of course, one tenet of the establishment of the American food system is land theft. This was a screenshot from some USDA records that are in the National Archives describing how farms owned by Japanese Americans were seized during wartime, using World War II as a pretext to seize very valuable land all around the West Coast for white farmers or for government use. So this is just one example, but there are many, many other examples. So I think it's enough. There are enough examples to make it really a paradigm of how our food has been created. Next slide, please. Another important tenet to remember, and this will help you deal with the Farm Bill, is to know that overproduction has been the modus operandi for a very long time. This is a picture of a manure lagoon at outside of a confined animal feeding operation. And if you have the opportunity to consume meat or trade meat with a foreign country or be involved in the American meat industry, you know that overproduction and low prices are a very important part of that industry, and this is just one environmental impact. But I just want to underscore it because we have been on the overproduction mode for the better part of the 20th century, and we don't seem to be stopping. And this is just one environmental impact, but we're going to see more impacts as we keep going on deeper into the Farm Bill. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another tenet of American food, or repeated pattern, path dependency, however you want to call it, is hyperconsolidation. This is produced by Oxfam. This graphic, it really shows how the structure of our economic system has led to many small food companies being scooped up by big food companies. Indeed, they want to be scooped up, and this is part of the way that, particularly the stock market is structured. But it has, led to fewer and fewer players controlling the vast majority of the supermarket, which, keep in mind, is how most Americans shop. Next slide, please. And of course, I always have to bring it back to the power of the market. And those of us who have worked with, say, children's food or other kinds of, food aid or other programs that are about dreaming about the best of what our food system could be, we do have to remember that there is still a strong philosophy in the United States that we must go with what the market wants. And what is the market but humans? So it's made by humans, created by humans, influenced by humans. And apparently some people have decided that America's favorite, as it's written here, is a pre-mixed, jar of peanut butter and jelly. And I just want to remind us that so much of how food companies define our tastes and then claim to be beholden to our tastes. And that's an interesting dynamic that we've become kind of set in. Next slide, please. So with those themes as sort of in the back of our mind, and when we get into our Q&A, please feel free to argue with me if you feel one of those underlying themes doesn't resonate with you or your research. We can talk about that. But in my view, they undergird what we can't argue about, which is the existence of the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is reauthorized every 5 years. I think some of you joined some of the previous Tara Do presentations on the Farm Bill, and so this is not new to you. But I want to get a quick just snap poll on who's here and you're familiar with the Farm Bill before I go in deeper. So would you mind to pull up the first poll, please, Ryan? Thank you. So how much do you know about the Farm Bill? And this is, please be, honest and not modest. If you are a veteran and know a lot, I'd love to hear. We'll leave about, 30, 40 seconds for everyone to answer. Great. Great. I'm so glad to have so many people who have heard of it, but are still learning. Okay, last few seconds. Okay, I think we can end the poll, and you want to share it out with everybody? Is that possible? Now can everyone see it? I want to share the results with you as well. Yeah. So it seems our largest point of people are just beginning involvement. Also, a significant amount of people are into it and still learning. No one counts themselves as a vet. But I'm really happy that we have some people who've never heard of the Farm Bill, and we love having you here. So I'll make it pretty brief because I sometimes like to say that, studying the Farm Bill might be like studying your favorite religious text. You might spend your whole life doing it. You might enter into, love or understanding or frustration with different parts of it over the course of your life, but that's okay. The point is that you feel that, you're starting to understand it and that parts of it can apply to your work. The Farm Bill is divided into chapters, which are called titles, and this is how they're organized. I won't have time in this presentation to go through every title, but I am going to share a lot of resources for you to dig in more into each title. I'll just let everyone skim here, and to know what these titles are called really does help you navigate the Farm Bill, because it's the lingua franca of the Farm Bill and of Washington, D.C., right? So if someone says we're going to talk about the nutrition title, you might say, well, I have a problem with the way that the SNAP program addresses nutrition. It shouldn't be called nutrition. I'll just say right now, that's not the right fight to have, because the word nutrition is already in there, and who cares really? What matters is that it's an umbrella to hold actually most of the Farm Bill, that Title IV, a huge amount of food aid for people that are hungry, and that's just the title that's been chosen. So I am someone who proposes to get to the heart of the matter. I'm not too thrilled that Title 12 miscellaneous is actually one of the most important areas, and maybe in the future we'll get the title changed to incorporate all the sustainable food, organic food, and regenerative farming that actually the miscellaneous title is starting to support. But for now, I feel it's just semantics. So, review some of these titles. Research, extension, and related matters is university, higher education research. If anyone knows the USDA research facility down in Albany called the Agricultural Research Service, ARS, that's supported by this title. So there's a lot of bits and bobs through here that we're going to start talking about and seeing through our lives. On the left column, I shared here the link to our Farm Bill seminar that I shared at the beginning, and maybe we can share it one more time, because I think whatever, at the risk of bragging, I think that we put together some great resources for the public, and I hope they continue to be used. Also, Dan Imhoff's series of Farm Bill primers are excellent. So he's put out illustrated guides to the Farm Bill, every Farm Bill. You can, get them in your favorite independent bookseller. And actually the most recent one was co-written by Christina Badaracco, who's one of our Berkeley grads, amazing public health graduate. So we have our Berkeley fingers all over it. And but it's really easy to use, easy to share, and maybe you can, share with your family for your next holiday present. Great. Someone have the book on their coffee table. Great place to have it. You have friends over for drinks, and one thing leads to another. Everyone could start reading this book. So great. Next slide, please. Here's the big picture on the Farm Bill, because again, we don't have time to get into each title, but I think it's important that we as taxpayers know what this means. The Farm Bill is $428 billion over 5 years, the current Farm Bill. This is a huge amount of money, sort of a dizzying amount of money, but I'd like to compare it to also how our economy works in general. In contrast, our defense appropriations that were just authorized for fiscal year 2023 were $816 billion for 1 year only. I recently updated this slide because I had fiscal year 2022, and I checked online how much we authorized. And as usual, Congress authorized even more than the president had requested. And I don't know about you, but I felt a little nauseous about this. But this is, these are all of our hard-earned tax dollars. And it's just important to keep it in mind, because some people say it's too much money for farmers, it's too much money for food. But keeping in mind these comparative numbers, I think, can be really helpful. In my view, it's a mixture of both legacy and newfangled ideas to stimulate the American food and agricultural sector. I talked about some of those ideas at the beginning of my presentation. And it affects, among the things it affects prices, what products we see on the shelves, environmental impacts of our food production, food safety, whether or not we get E. coli from the food we eat, international relations, how trading goes with our trading partners, millions of acres of public lands, meaning forests, up in the Sierras, you might go on your summer vacation. A lot of that is actually controlled by the Forest Service, which is under USDA, which is supported by the Farm Bill. So it's touching us in so many ways, and I hope that I can whet your appetite to get into it more deeply. A really exciting new development of the past few years is that CRS reports are now available to the public. I recommend checking out this link, crsreports.congress.gov. The Congressional Research Service is the independent think tank of the Library of Congress. And when members of Congress decide that they want to possibly do a bill, for many years, they've asked these amazingly smart experts at the Library of Congress to write them up a short background research. How much would it cost to, I don't know, how much would it cost to, add a new animal shelter in every county in America because we're concerned about, homeless dogs and cats, for example. So it's a prospective research. They quickly do that research and say, well, this would be the economic impact. It's a win for dog and cat owners. It's going to be a loss for whoever gets their land seized, because we're going to force each county to have a dog and cat shelter. You know, they kind of do a very objective winners, losers, economic scenario. And these reports, and by the way, they're also written at what I've heard is a 4th grade level, so that all members of Congress can understand it. So they're very readable, easy, clear, simple. And for many years, they were only available to members of Congress, or you could request through your member to get one, but now they're fully open to the public. So it's a tremendous resource, and it's free of any, I do really trust it. It's really free of any partisan, you know, feelings. And so it's a baseline understanding of what is being proposed. And you can read reports about laws that have already been passed, or, you know, they sort of do prospective research. But usually members, they don't want to sort of show their hand too much and make it controversial. So they more do background research. So again, on that dog and cat example, they might ask CRS to do a report on, you know, what is the national expense of homeless dogs and cats, you know, over the last 20 years. So they'll do that research, and then they'll use that background research to propose their bill about the animal shelters, if that makes sense. So save your questions. We're going to get to them at the end. Thank you. I'm so excited. I wish I could see everyone's chat, but I'll get so distracted. So I'll catch up after. Next slide, please. So back to Schoolhouse Rock, if anyone remembers it, it still has enduring value. And again, I still use some of these elementary school materials for teaching adults about passing a bill, because you know, who really remembers what happened in 4th grade? And it's so important, you know, for us to revisit and use. So the Farm Bill specifically is an omnibus bill. So it's a big old bill with many little bills inside it. So this is the process for the most part that it takes, highly simplified. There's many more complicated charts and trees I could share with you, but I'm trying to keep you with me till the end of the presentation. So I try to really simplify it. Members of Congress proposed marker bills in the year or two preceding a new farm bill. So that's pretty much already happened. They might be doing little ones, but for instance, we at Berkeley Food Institute put out a webinar last October on Justice for Black Farmers Act, which was proposed by Cory Booker, who was a member of the Senate Ag Committee, and that was considered a marker bill. He was testing feeling and you know, testing the reaction to some type of reparations for Black farmers. And you could consider that a marker bill for the Farm Bill. Wide support among members and constituents signals likely inclusion in the omnibus bill. By the way, if you want to know more about marker bills, you can see for one of our assignments for our Farm Bill seminar was for the students to research current marker bills out there. So you can see some of the past student research on some proposed marker bills. Also, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and other networks do share about marker bills. Or you can contact your own member of Congress and ask, what marker bills have you proposed with regards to the Farm Bill? Once those are all out, or still once we come to the time, let's say, that we need to start preparing the Farm Bill, the House and Senate Agriculture Committees create versions and vote on them. So they have their separate versions. And then a conference committee by party leadership is created to reconcile both versions. This is same to all laws, not just omnibus laws. And then, of course, they reconcile, they fight over it, who wins, who loses out of the differing versions proposed by the House and Senate. And then the full Congress will vote on the combined bill. And most likely after all that suffering, the president will sign it. And especially for something that's a specific and complicated bill like this, I don't think there usually is not any barrier to the president signing it, because it's really, he knows that he or she will know that the experts are these committee members, right? If it's a more simple bill, it might be more of an issue with the president signing it, but this is, you know, it's a huge body of work, and everyone's like, just please get out of the way and sign it, because we're so tired of this. So that's the usual process. Next slide, please. And if there's anyone currently working on the Hill and has any, you know, corrections for me, feel free to put them in the chat or later. So let's do a quick pop quiz, and people could turn off their mic and just yell out, what do these men have in common?
They're from California?
They're from California, that's right. Good, half of the answer.
All our ag committee members on the House.
That is right. Perfect. Who was that? Hector. Yay. Hector and Masika, thank you so much. That's right. These are now the 3 California members we have in the House Ag Committee. We recently took a hit. There's used to have like 6 or 7. Now we have 3. You remember that the new Congress, the new House of Representatives, you all voted for when? When did you decide who was going to go back to the House of Representatives? Anyone want to shout out?
2022.
That's right, November 2022. So you just voted on your new members, and then there was a big reshuffling on the House side. And after everyone has voted in, everyone started in January, and now everyone has settled into committees. And of course, some new senators were also elected. But I'm just showing on the House side, we now have 2 Democrats, Mr. Carbajal and Mr. Costa, and 1 Republican, Mr. LaMalfa, are our Californians on the House Agriculture Committee. Neither of our senators are on the Senate Ag Committee with regards to California. Do we have any folks tuning in from outside of California? Maybe you could put your state in the chat. I don't have slides prepared for you, but if you're tuning in from another US state, great, great, great. Wow. Oh, I wish I had made more of a national chart, but this is so exciting. So, on your next lunch break, just make your own little slide. Find out if any of your members, if any of the House or Senate Ag Committee members are from your state. It would be great to know. Okay. Great. Next slide, please. So if you're feeling left out by the fact that there's only 2 or 3 people that you've never met or don't really know, the solution for how we're going to impact the Farm Bill and getting to what I promised in this presentation, which is what you can do in the Farm Bill, is democracy. How are we going to get there? This is a photo from a candidate forum we had a few years back, organized by some amazing Berkeley students and grads that I moderated, that was for the California State Senate seat, District 15. The woman on the left, Prevail, Buffy Wicks, who's now the state senator. But it was a great opportunity, I think, for both of the candidates to talk about their perspective on food policy. And they had a packed house. And all these organizations behind us were, both literally and metaphorically watching the proceedings. And I felt that had a really good impact on both of the candidates and their views toward food. Next slide, please. How? Here are some real practical ways that we can get involved besides making PowerPoint slides of your own. Here are a few other practical ways that I'd suggest, because it can feel like a lot. And of course, for those of us on the West Coast, that Washington, D.C. is far away. Join a group working on the Farm Bill, start a group working on the Farm Bill, talk to your food producer about what they want from the Farm Bill, call up your new and returning 2022 electeds. I'm going to get more into that in the next slide. Vote next year. Yes, it does still matter. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why. Join a local food sovereignty group, learn and grow together, start a business that participates in politics, and really demand the Farm Bill reflect the food system you want to build. Oops, it got cut off a little bit there. As you can see on the graphic on the bottom, it's kind of a list of all the advocacy groups and stakeholders that are involved in the Farm Bill. And being together in a group, voting is an individual act, but advocacy and even lawmaker education is often a group act, meaning that, the more the merrier, the more people can get together around shared interests. It's actually easier for electeds to understand what you want. So there probably is a group already out there reflecting your view on the food system. And if there's not, you can always start one. Next slide, please. And just to give credit to the grassroots, here are just a few Farm Bill ideas that have come up from the grassroots. They were not dreamed up on Capitol Hill, but they are ideas that really came out of local community organizing, and many of them have made their way into the Farm Bill. And people are still demanding that they be expanded or changed, tweaked. So it is that iterative process that we hope to get to. Next slide, please. I think another really important solution that you can play a part in is narrative change. The graphic here on the lower right is is a piece I wrote a few years back, Why the Farm Bill Matters to Asian Americans. I come from an Asian American farming family, and I had never heard of the Farm Bill. And even more, once I grew up and started to learn about the Farm Bill, no one was making a point about how it might play a role in my family's business, my community, Asian Americans, either historically or in modern, times. So I just decided to try to research it and write about it, and it became a point of activism for me. But in a similar way to this final bullet point, you can create art about the Farm Bill and its impacts on various communities, whether it be disability community, transgender community, the Colonias border area, the Upper Plains area, whether it be geographic, identity-based, language-based. If there is a way that you can help to explain how the Farm Bill impacts your community, that will be really important and helpful. If you're an academic or a researcher, weave the Farm Bill into what you're writing about. And to Ryan's point about his own academic journey is that he really got, he started to see how policy undergirds so much of what we do. And if you're also seeing that, put it down on paper and help other people understand. We can write articles or do other research specifically on House and Senate Agriculture Committee members, right? Like Mr. Carbajal, his first name is Salud, which means health. Wow, what is he doing on the Farm Bill? He's our fellow Californian, who wants to write an article about his stances, the things you like, the things you don't like about what he's done on the Farm Bill. Maybe we have a lot to thank him for or a lot to criticize him for. I'm actually not quite sure, but this is the kind of attention we need to pay going into the Farm Bill. We also need to tell stories about midterm elections and the impacts on the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. Many past Farm Bills have turned around due to midterm elections. It doesn't seem like we're going to have it this time, thankfully, because the midterms are behind us, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get this done before the 2024 election. But it does impact who's at the table right now is the election that just happened in 2022. And the same will be true for the 2026 election, of course. Next slide, please. And as I'm coming to the end, I just want to make a few other sort of important points as we're thinking about the Farm Bill. Implementation also really, really matters. So I talked about how the bill becomes law, and some of these, of course, sometimes they can be, alienating processes in Washington, D.C. But I think another really good thing to think about is how the Farm Bill gets implemented and the role we can play in this. This is a flyer here from actually New York City Farmers Markets years ago. They put out this wonderful multilingual flyers about how to use EBT at the farmers markets. This is a Farm Bill funded program that the Farm Bill might have said, you could do it in other languages. It would be nice. Sure, there's a law buried somewhere that says you should, but frankly, a lot of municipalities and districts don't follow through on that. But credit to New York City, they did, and credit to, I think, New York City Green Markets. They took it all the way. They made these beautiful flyers in many languages, and I had to pick one up and save it because I thought, they're maximizing this Farm Bill funding. And this was years ago, so I'm sure it's gotten much better since then. Let's do poll number 2, if that's okay, because we just were talking about members of Congress, and I forgot I wanted to ask folks a little bit more about your interactions with members of Congress, if that's okay.
I think, Nina, that maybe all of those polls came up in the same.
Oh,
able to have a chance to answer all of them.
Oh, I see. So nobody answered 2 and 3 or didn't have a chance, or they did?
I think they were answered, and I can't see that. I can't reshare them now, but I think they were answered.
Okay, great. Oh, I see. They were. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, they were. What is your relationship with members of Congress? And I'll just read it back to you. We had 70% say that I'm vaguely aware of who they are and what they do. And 8% of you said that you have each other on speed dial. 8% of you have zero trust in them. And 18% of you have no idea who your members of Congress are. So we're going to work on that a little bit more too. And then Another part, I think this gets to implementation. My final question, which was, have you ever been to a USDA event, met a USDA staffer, or received any type of support from the USDA? 80% of you said no. And I know there are a lot of farmers and farm advocates on this call. So I think that speaks to how far the Farm Bill has to go. But 20% of you said yes. So we can share this out, the results after. And if there is a chance for those folks who join late, if there is a chance to reshare the poll, if it's still open, that's cool. If not, that's fine. So implementation matters. And I just want to go through this a little bit, because for those of us who maybe missed the boat on a legislation that passed, not to despair, there's still a lot you can do in terms of how a bill is implemented. And that's what we do in all the years in between the farm bills. I believe that we need to hold USDA to a standard of customer service, of cultural competency, of a commitment to regionalism, meaning understanding what each region needs, not applying Kansas solutions to Parley or California, but understanding that each part of America deserves, particularly when these changing climate, tailored solutions. We need to reject silver bulletism and reject Eurocentrism, meaning that, oh, the only solutions for our land can come from Western Europe. Of course, that doesn't make sense geographically. And also to reject silver bulletism, meaning that there can only be, that if I would just, tweak this one molecule, we're going to just fix everything in the Farm Bill. It's a sad fact that it's so complicated, so much more complicated than that. So if we can just know that from the front end, then we can feel liberated from trying to search for that molecule and instead work on its totality. And finally, data. If you're working in direct service or in direct advocacy or food production, as much as you can create, as much as you can grab data from your work, that's going to be so important in terms of making the case for the change you want to see. Next slide, please. And as I wrap up, I just want to share a little bit. We had a wonderful gathering of a lot of leaders just last month in Washington, D.C. We had Berkeley Food Institute a summit with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and the Land Assistance Fund, as well as American University. And I know we don't have that much time, but I just want to share a few of the high-level takeaways from that gathering. And you can see the proceedings on the website, and I can share them out after. We really talked about thank you, gathering data with consent. Yes, I meant one's own data, not someone else's data, but yes, very important. We talked about the terminology and how it's necessary as a political tool. How can we, practically point the Farm Bill towards racial justice? We talked, and this is, of course, many of you know Farmer Ben Burkett, who has been on the front lines of national advocacy for, some call them reparations, others would call them, due process for what has been done to Black and other farmers of color in the United States. We really talked about the complicated diversity in rural America, and I think that's really important to remember. And one speaker really spoke very clearly also about what she called the fallacy of white supremacy. And it was very interesting. She said, as we're going on, don't just say white supremacy as part of our culture, but really always use in the full sentence the fallacy of, because it's time that we sort of unlearn some of these ways of thinking that have been so deep, unfortunately, in the Farm Bill. Next slide, please. And finally, in terms of things we can do, we can teach and learn the complexity of food systems, and we can do this wherever we're sitting. And I want to share this with you, two of our amazing UC Berkeley BFI grads, besides Ryan and Lainey. There's Kaylee Fire-Eisel, who's now at CAF, and Pallavi Sherikar, who's now at the U.S. State Department working on climate policy. They're both our BFI grads who really embrace policy as a means to food systems change, and they've gone on to amazing things. So these are just two of our superstar grads. There's a bunch more on this call, but whether or not you're working at a formal educational institution, we can all do our part to pass on the complexity of food systems and the excitement of the Farm Bill. Next slide, please. And that's me. That's my contact information on social media or email. Feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to put you in touch with more resources. We also will be producing an action-packed email after this to share some of the links that went by quickly. And it looks like we have 39 comments awaiting me in the chat. I don't know if they're questions or just comments, but I'll leave it to the moderators to organize the questions however you want to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Nina. Really appreciate it. And I hope that people are starting to see that there are ways that we can actually engage in the Farm Bill. We have a Q&A actually that you can click on. There's probably some questions that have gone in the chat, but if you have specific questions, you can drop them in the Q&A. And then also, I think if you want to raise your hand and ask a question to Nina directly, that would be great too. But I can start with one question, one of the first questions in the Q&A here, which is, can you give some examples of groups in the Bay Area that are working on the Farm Bill or other groups focused on food sovereignty in the Bay?
Yeah, great. And I'd love other folks to chime in. Again, now I'm executive director. I'm not the policy director of BFI. In terms of, I think did I see Jane Stubbe on this call? No. So Bay Area groups working on the Farm Bill, I'm pretty sure Slow Food USA is. National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition is one of my favorites, but they're a coalition of groups. And if you have a local food group, I really recommend honestly joining them because it's a national coalition and they share really important information about the Farm Bill, and the more members, the merrier. So it's a coalition-based way of influencing the Farm Bill if you care about sustainable agriculture. So they don't have chapters per se, but you can see the list of their members on their website. And it's sustainableagriculture.net. I know, and so there's also a California caucus. Who else am I missing? I know that California Food and Farming Network works more on state policy. Please chime in. Who else is working on from the Bay Area? That was the question, from the Bay Area on the Farm Bill. Anyone else working on it? I know La Via Campesina is an international group, and I'm not sure if there's a chapter in the Bay Area. Anyone else working in a group locally? I would also check the NSAC members in California, which are not coming to my mind right now, but you can search their membership and then you can know who's cool within California to join. Should I just go through these ones that are written in the Q&A and answer them verbally? Is that good?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. So I have a great question here from Ash, I believe. Oh no, sorry, from Cameron first. What are your thoughts on timing regarding calling representatives? Was there a point that's no longer relevant? Great question. I would check a DC resource like politico.com or thehill.com, or do you guys know about Ag Alert? Sorry, what is it? Out of Food and Environment Reporting News, Ag Alert, Chuck Abbott's, I'm sorry, Fern's Ag Insider is what it's called. Fern's Ag Insider. I'll share the link. This is a wonderful DC based, also sustainable agriculture. I'm just going to type the answer here into, can everyone see? I think everyone can see it if I type it into the Q&A. Oh, but then it disappeared. That sucks. I'll put it into the chat next time here. And that's where you should check for the state of play with the Farm Bill. And I think calling now and often is a great idea. And then it'll say there, the Farm Bill is getting ready to be signed. Okay, it's happening. No, it's not happening. There'll be some fits and starts, and then finally it'll be signed. And then once it's signed, yes, that's too late to call. Or, well, you can call after and say thank you for whatever they did. And I think that's always a nice thing also. Great. Civil Eats is also great.
Nina, can I ask a clarifying question about calling your member of Congress? Just because I'm in California now and I used to live in DC, do you have to call before 5 p.m. Eastern to, get in touch with them, or do they have like voicemails?
It would be better. I think it would be better because then you can reach a real human. And what they do is they have little checklists, and they check off about what issue, because people are calling them on every single issue under the sun. And so they won't be able to spend a lot of time with you, but it's best to be as specific as possible. I'm calling because I really want them to support XYZ regarding the Farm Bill. Or if you want to call back, I need more information on what their stance is on the Farm Bill. Of course, first look on their website. But yeah, it would be better to call during East Coast business hours. Another way that and can you imagine people in Hawaii are so disenfranchised from the process because of the time zone difference. And this is not completely true, but for the most part, district offices work on constituent services and DC offices work on those policy issues. So if you have an issue with the VA or Social Security or getting your passport, usually the district office will be a great help to you. That means like, Senator Padilla's San Francisco office is who you call. But if you want to talk to Senator Padilla about the Farm Bill more specifically, then the DC office is more who handles that. But they do communicate with each other, of course.
And Nina, this is a good time to drop in the chat the link that you shared with me, the House Committee on Ag's request for feedback.
Yes, please do. Yes, I just found out that I think via the Organic Consumers Association, which is another great national group, shared out that it's a very general. The House Agriculture Committee says, send us your feedback on the Farm Bill by this Friday, the 9th. Very general. I'm sure they're going to get a mountain of responses by lobbyists. So it's a nice open time to put in what you think. And again, if you hear what I'm saying, I think participating as individuals is important, but the reason to participate in a group is that you can all sing the same song. And you see how much easier that can be for policymakers to understand and to sort through. You see what I'm saying? Because even on this call, we have what, 61 people. If everyone is giving a slightly different version of the same thing, it can be hard for those staff to understand. It's actually all the same thing, right? So when there's unity around certain ideas, it's best if that's expressed in the same way. And that's why joining a group is important. But if you don't have time to join a group before Friday, that's okay. Still get in your comments, and that's a good start. And I think it's also a way of them building a mailing list to keep in touch with you about the Farm Bill, which is a good thing. And you can always quit that mailing list, of course. Let me move on to get through a little bit more of the questions. I see from Ash, in addition to engaging as individual citizens, are there ways in which our organizations could get engaged as well? Absolutely. Well, like I've been saying, join a coalition, join a coalition, join a coalition. Yes. There's coalitions of business groups. There's coalitions of advocacy groups. There's coalitions of women's groups. There's all sorts of coalitions of farmers, producers based on different crops. Of course, there's trade associations. There's scientific associations. There's commodity groups. These are all very valid and important ways to get your organization engaged. There's the National Farmers Market Coalition. There's the National Farm to School Coalition. These are all coalitions of exactly what they sound like, people working on that part of the food system who are determined to advocate together. How do we find, we have another version of the same question. How do we find local groups in our area working on the Farm Bill? I think we've kind of touched on that one. Great. Someone shared Heal Food Alliance, Slow Food USA, National Young Farmers Coalition. Great. Also, I should say regarding anti-hunger issues, there is a bunch of groups in DC that are also coalitions. Like for instance, FRAC, Food Research Action Center, has been around. The Emerson National Hunger Center, Feeding America. These are kind of groups like consortiums of food banks and other direct feeding groups that they advocate around the Farm Bill. And, they also have a lot of great information on their website. I know I said that pretty fast, so let me share a few acronyms. FRAC. And we already shared about NSEC. Also, of course, Union of Concerned Scientists. Also, it's not a coalition, but that's more of a group that individuals are part of. What policies do you recommend advocating for when calling representatives? Particularly curious about anything regarding to improving nutrition. Well, as UC Berkeley is a public university, we cannot recommend being for or against any specific pending legislation. But you all are so smart to know what it is. And if you need help in navigating what specific policies, I think learning from these highly trained coalitions is a great way to start. You talked, Cameron, about improving nutrition. And I think if you start to dig around on the website of some of these national groups, you can see they say like our legislative agenda. You can start to understand what they you know, what they advocate for and some of the current issues. For example, you know, SNAP for post-incarcerees, work requirements is a big Republican talking point right now. So there's a lot of ongoing bills about whether or not how strict and how cruel dispensation of our feeding programs will be. And you can see on the national websites of some of these advocacy organizations, they describe what these proposals are and what their perspective is on it. I'm trying to think, does anyone know the group that Andrew Chain is working for right now? I'm just going to write his name on here because he's a Californian now working in national food policy research. And he's doing a great job. Since I can't do it right now, can someone just like Google what organization he's with? I forgot. He was with California Association of Food Banks in California. And now he's doing great work nationally and has great research. Okay, let me move on. I can go about 10 minutes over if other folks can. I really want to get to all your great questions. So let's keep drilling through them and I'll try to get to everyone's. From Hector, will you be sharing the marker bills that the grads are working on? Yes, we will be. And I will work, since the class just finished, the stuff is not on our website yet, but I will get that information from Sakina and get it out to you all in a way that, you know, with that the ones that the students are comfortable sharing. So thank you. I'm going to put a ping in that and get back to you on that. Thank you, Hector. Okay, so let's see chat. Okay, so from Jenna, thoughts on payments to farmers to reduce water use. That is not my area of expertise. And yeah, I can't really comment on that. Jenna, are you a farmer and are you working on, or I'm curious, what's your relationship to this? If you're still on and you want to take yourself off mute. Maybe Jenna left us. Are you still there, Jenna? Yeah, because I was curious where you're coming at this from in terms of like water governance. I will give a shout out to oh great, thank you. End Child Poverty California. Thank you so much, Shelley. Our faculty co-director, Tim Bowles, is a wonderful researcher on water use, climate change, and sustainable agriculture. I don't think he's on this call, but I definitely recommend looking up his research because he does talk a lot about the intersection of policy, water, and soil. He's a soil scientist by training and an agroecologist. And yeah, his research is top notch. He has a new paper just out. So, and he works with a huge group of researchers at Berkeley called the Diversified Farming Systems Group. So I think maybe you'll see Lainey on one of those papers. I'm not sure. And yeah, they touch on some of these issues. It's complex. And of course, in California, it's different than in other states. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I just want to take this opportunity to give a shout out. I think that, you know, one of the best ways, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Nina, to understand what would be helpful in the Farm Bill is to actually talk to farmers, especially if you go to a farmer's market, and find out what policies are impacting them or what programs they would like to see more of or have easier access to. And definitely want to give a shout out for our program at Climate Farm School. Is a great way to actually get on the land and learn directly from farmers and experience what regenerative agriculture is all about. And I think the more you get into food systems, the more it becomes clear what types of policies are needed and what things are holding things up. So in our follow-up email to this, we'll share more about the program that we offer, obviously bringing in people like Nina and having talks like this, but also getting people directly on the land and connected to farmers who can tell you what they need. So
great. So thank you so much. Before folks log off, I want to get to these last two questions. And if folks have any others that you want to say verbally, you know, feel free to, I guess, just raise your hand. But let me do real quick first Kate's and then Alana's. Kate has a great question. Is it worth reading the current Farm Bill primer book you mentioned, or will it change so much that the new one is better to wait? No, they don't change so much. Yes, the last one is excellent, and it's going to be 95% applicable to this Farm Bill. So, you know, to the frustration of some people, they move slowly, but I guess it's good if you're still on the learning curve that they move slowly. So I think that the last Farm Bill primer by Dan Imhoff is still excellent, has excellent information. And the CRS reports, even from the last Farm Bill, many of them are really, really still relevant. So yeah, great question. Alana asked the questions about the upsides and downsides of the current programs funding climate smart ag in the Farm Bill, like EQIP and CSP, which is the Conservation Stewardship Program. Are they accessible? Is there enough buy-in? Well, I'll just say in general on these is that someone said to me in DC that some of these, particularly soil health programs that are, ostensibly for climate smart ag, the support for them is a mile wide and an inch deep, which I thought is so funny. And yeah, that means that they feel bipartisan and happy. So most people sign on to them, but when pushed up to the limit, many members of Congress will let them go because they care more about other issues, meaning that we don't have enough members of Congress for whom climate smart ag is like their top priority. So I think I felt that was a pretty accurate assessment. So I think that it's a a good beginning. Of course, as many people know, there's no like set definition of so-called climate smart ag, right? And I think we can agree that usually USDA or the Farm Bill kind of tries things out in an awkward way for a few years before they can sort of improve things. So I think that now is a great time to give them feedback on these programs. If you haven't heard of them and you need their help, then you answered your own question. They're not accessible. I think, of course, more and more members of Congress are dealing with the reality of climate change. And of course, we have many members of Congress who do not believe climate change exists. So how do we thread that political needle in order to get the support for farmers they need? You might notice that some of these are not they don't have the word climate in it, right? Some of them are like soil health efforts, or, some of them are phrased different ways to get to the same ends. And you can see why that's necessary if some people don't believe in climate change, but their constituents are farmers who are dealing with the ravages of climate change on their farm or ranch. So they know they must respond. So that's, yeah. So I think that in general, it's still in an early experimental stage and they really need feedback. And I think it's also going to keep changing. The lingo is going to keep changing as we fight over what climate change is and what causes it. But again, I wouldn't focus too much on the lingo, focus on your original question, which is accessibility and buy-in, which are excellent questions. And I think that it can improve. And I think that the committees do really want our feedback on these programs. So great. Okay. Raghav, you got me a big one here at the end. Resources, talk about the ways the Farm Bill affects other climate issues that are perhaps indirectly related to the food system. Funding for rural electric co-ops, fertilizer, ammonia subsidies, others. How the Farm Bill affects other climate issues. Don't know much about this, but I've heard that they're a relevant piece of the Farm Bill. Absolutely. I mean, and I'm sorry if I didn't link this back to the title as much as I could. Really, if you think about it, what parts of the Farm Bill are not about climate change, right? Everything is about climate change, right? Climate change is about how we consume and live in this world, right? And the Farm Bill touches all of that, whether it be through SNAP, through slaughterhouses, through how farmers, drive the tractors on their land. Like you said, rural electrification. Yeah, it's in every single part of the Farm Bill. So back to my point about finding one part of the Farm Bill that you love or hate and really digging into that, I think is a really excellent exercise. Yeah. And, we should demand that our policymakers do more research on the climate impacts of each title, right? And thinking about it really creatively and carefully, and doing life cycle analyses of each parts of the Farm Bill, right? To really understand it, because so much of what we've done is on a path dependency of, like I said, overconsumption, hyperproduction, and the era of cheap fossil fuels. And if we're going to really shift course through every title, we're going to have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. So I think it's an excellent an excellent point, and those few that you mentioned are just the tip of the iceberg of how the Farm Bill affects other climate issues. So yeah, I wish we had more time to go into it more, but I love the questions. Op-ed, written piece on the Farm Bill, yes. And if I can answer any other questions, anyone else want to shout them out, and maybe we'll go to 10 after or 15 after. If not, we can wrap it up here, and I'm going to try to remember everyone's last pending questions and put them into the follow-up email that I'll work with Tara Duan. So thank you all so much for coming. You've survived over an hour of the Farm Bill, and well, at least 37 of you have. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you in whatever venues where we're working on food systems change.
Thank you so much, Nina. I think I can speak for everyone saying that was a ton of information, and really grateful for it, not in an overwhelming way, but in in learning about something that we don't get the opportunity to talk about as much as we need to. So I really appreciate it. I did want to ask one just last question, which is,
sure,
how optimistic are you about change coming through the Farm Bill?
Change coming through the Farm Bill. Yes, very optimistic, always optimistic. And I'm trying to follow the lead of farmers and food producers who are continuing to produce even under very difficult circumstances. They have to be optimistic. So who is not engaged in farming on an everyday basis, who am I to not be optimistic? Yes, this Farm Bill has more citizen engagement than ever before. We have more diversity in the House and Senate Ag committees than ever before, of all different types of diversity. We have a more engaged populace, more organized coalitions, and more people that care about, say, regenerative ag and climate change. So yes, our prospects are really good depending on what we do. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nina.
That's a great way to end. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you, Lainey. Thanks, everyone. Keep up the great work. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks, Elisa.
Thank you,
Take care,
Nina. Thanks,
everybody.
Farm School.
Thank you.